Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. I'm back, y'all. I got the facts, y'all, on Backlit Cinema, the podcast. I'm your host, Zo. That's Z-O or Z-O if you're outside of the U.S. You know, fans overseas. Taking a look back at the movies of yesteryear. It's the 83rd episode. Thank you for downloading or streaming. We really appreciate it. The reason we started this show was to strengthen the bond between my son, Zach, and me. We watched movies that I loved when I was growing up in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s, and I'm going to tell you what Zach thought about those classic movies. If you like what you're about to hear, then please take the time to offer a tiny bit of support by giving us a rating or review, I can talk, on your favorite podcast app. And you can also share our show on social media. Speaking of which, please follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. You can find the details in the show notes. Now, the movie that I'm about to talk about, the movie that me and Zach watched recently, it is very offensive to a certain sect of people. It's going to be very offensive to the people of India. And I only just learned this. I didn't realize how super offensive that this movie has been and continues to be. And let's face it, a lot of Western films in general are like that, and American films in particular tend to be offensive to minorities and people outside of the U.S., particularly brown people. So I just want to acknowledge that, and we're going to talk more about that as we dive into this movie. And before we talk about what we just watched, I want to give some space to a podcast that I've been listening to. It's called the Made for TV Movie Podcast. Check it out.
Hello, everyone. I'm Beth.
And I'm Kirsten, and we are the hosts of the Made for TV Movie Club podcast. Beth, we've been friends for a long time.
We sure have, Kay, since before Rachel kissed Ross for the first time.
It's true, and since we share a love of all things TV, we decided to team up to review our favorite TV movies from the 70s, 80s, and 90s.
You don't need to watch the movie. We did that for you.
You can find us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, including Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Deezer, and iHeartRadio.
And find us on our socials.
Join us in our Facebook group, Made for TV Movie Club Podcast. Follow us on Insta at made_for_TV_movie_club. Tweet us at TV Movie Club Pod 1.
Or give us a Goog at hashtag FFTVMC podcast, and you'll find us.
We'll see you soon in the clubhouse.
All right, we're back. So the movie that we watched, one of my favorite movies that I watched when I was growing up, a movie that I just learned was so offensive to the people of India that it was banned in India, that it could not be filmed there, and it was banned from being shown in theaters, banned from being broadcast on TV. This movie is Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. So, what's this movie about? Well, before he went searching for the Ark of the Covenant, Indiana Jones used his knowledge and skill to enrich himself by finding long-lost artifacts and selling them to the highest bidder. One of these transactions with a Chinese gangster goes horribly wrong, and Indy, his sidekick Short Round, and an unwilling companion, Willie Scott, find themselves in India, where Indy is compelled to help a small tribe retrieve a magic stone stolen by an evil priest. Indiana Jones learns that there is more to life than fortune and glory. This movie was released May 23rd, 1984, produced by Paramount Pictures and Lucasfilm. It grossed over $197 million in the U.S. and Canada and over $333 million worldwide on a $28 million budget. It had great reviews. This movie is starring Harrison Ford as Dr. Henry Walton Jones Jr., better known as Indiana Jones or Indy. You know Harrison Ford from Star Wars, Blade Runner, The Fugitive, and a bunch of other films. I also wanted to point out, I got Indiana Jones' full name here, Dr. Henry Walton Jones. And I've gotten a lot of extra information from a wiki on Indiana Jones, so I'll be inputting it here. Obviously, a lot of this information is not on the credits of the movie, and I don't know if it's even been officially acknowledged, but I'm going to input them here. For example, Kate Capshaw plays Wilhelmina Willie Scott. Now, in the film, they never confirmed that her full name was Wilhelmina and that her only name that she gave was Willie Scott. But I thought it was fun to input this from the wiki. She being Kate Capshaw has been in Black Rain, Just Cause, and Dreamscape. Ke Huy Quan played Wan Lee, but he is better known as Short Round, one of my favorite characters. He's also been in The Goonies. He took a pretty long break from major movies and then popped up again in a fantastic role in Everything Everywhere All at Once. He's also, what I did not know, he was also in a TV show called Head of the Class, which I used to watch religiously. Also in this movie is Amrish Puri. He played Mula Ram. He's been in Gandhi, Mission The Last Warrior, and Mr. India. Roshan Seth played Chatar Lal. He's been in Street Fighter. Guess who played in Street Fighter? This is a man from India. This is an Indian man. And his name is Roshan Seth. And he's been in the movie Street Fighter. Any guesses to who he played? I'll leave that up to you to figure that out. He's also been in Proof and Dumbo. Next is Roy Chiao. He played Lao Chi. He's been in Bloodsport, Summer Show, and the Bruce Lee movie Game of Death. Next up is D.R. Nanayakara. He plays the shaman, and I learned that the shaman's name is Marhan. He's also been in Sidevi, Amma, and Bicycle Horror. Up next is Raj Singh. He played the Little Maharaja, but I've learned that he's also known as His Supreme Highness, the Maharaja of Pankot, Zalam Singh. And lastly is Dan Aykroyd in a Blink and You'll Miss It cameo, and he played Earl Weber. He's been in Ghostbusters, The Blues Brothers, and Conehead. So I'll just let you know right now, the cameo that Dan Aykroyd was in was, there is a scene where Indiana Jones is trying to escape from the Chinese gangsters. He's out in the streets. He's heading toward a plane, and the guy that secured the plane is Earl Weber. And Earl Weber, says that, it was something that he had did on short notice, and it was the best he can do, even though they'll be traveling with poultry. So that character is Dan Aykroyd. You don't even really see his face too good. Not even in the DVD or in HD do you really notice his face, but that's definitely him. So this movie was directed by Steven Spielberg, and among his many movies that he directed are Ready Player One, War Horse, and War of the Worlds. I just finished listening to Ready Player One on audio from the audio app. I forgot what it's called. Audio Gap. What is it called? I don't remember. Anyway, it's an audio book. I listened to it. It's pretty good. It's not super fantastic, but it was pretty good. I'm encouraged to see the movie because I'd never seen Ready Player One. This movie was written by Willie Hoyk. Oh shoot, I forgot to practice pronouncing this name. Is Huyck. I'm going to say Hawk, Willard Hawk, and Gloria Katz and George Lucas. So Willard Hawk and Gloria Katz, as a team, they wrote the screenplay for Howard the Duck, American Graffiti, and Radioland Murders, and they've worked closely with George Lucas on many of George Lucas's films. George Lucas himself is credited for writing THX 1138, American Graffiti, and all of Star Wars. Basically, it's like Star Wars and Indiana Jones are his main things. Those are his main squeezes. The music is, of course, by John Williams. He has 289 credits, and I'm going to say and counting, because even though this man is in his 90s, he probably has a few more compositions in him. For example, he's composing the music for Indiana Jones 5, and he's already done an upcoming the music for an upcoming movie, The Fablemans, and he's also done like movies like Munich and Star Wars and Jaws, I think, and just a bunch of others. And that's it for the opening credits. And now for some announcements. For the announcements, I'll once again plug my my merch, the t-shirts, face masks, the jerseys at our website, backlickcinema.com/shop, as well as teespring.com and tpublic.com. And now let's go talk about our favorite parts. All right, now we're at the part of the show where I talk about our favorite parts in the movie, my favorite parts, and Zachary's favorite parts. And now, as far as Zach goes, he really enjoyed the movie, just like I did. This movie, besides from all of the offensive parts, as far as the structure and the humor and the action of the film, that aged extremely well. But as far as cultural sensitivity, it wasn't even good back then. So of course, it's still not good now. Could this movie or a movie like this be made today? No, not without being extremely offensive. Of course not. But as I said, I was just learning about this. So as far as the things that Zachary liked, he liked all the really actiony parts and all the humor parts. So there's a part where they're going into all of the stuff when they finally get to the Temple of Doom, and all the action in there. And he recognizes that that people refer to this as like the darkest movie or the darkest Indiana Jones movie. And it is pretty dark. And he recognized like the whipping of the little boy, the drinking of the blood, or the whipping of Indiana Jones, the enslavement of the children. Those are all pretty dark things that have gone on in this movie. And Indiana slapping Short Round when he was under mind control. So that is those sort of things that kind of bring the darkness to this movie. But he liked the action and like the cart going down the tunnel, the action sequences like the plane crashing, or the opening of the film where he's giving off the James Bond vibes. So let's get into those parts. So the movie opens in a very James Bondish type of way, which is kind of interesting because it opens with a singing number, but instead of like singing in the credits, it's Willie Scott on stage singing Anything Goes in primarily Chinese. So it's a huge dance number, and they sing the entire song. It doesn't get cut off, and it's a fabulous dance number. And it's only after this number that Indiana Jones enters, and he's very suave, in this white jacket and black slack. He's extremely suave, extremely smooth, giving off huge 007 vibes. I remember when I first watched this movie, I was like, man, is this 007? But no, it's definitely Indiana Jones. But in this case, it feels like this is the type of person that 007 would disguise himself as. But Indiana Jones in this case is the real thing. He's not there on a secret mission. He's there to make money for himself. This is a sequel. So, I mean, not a sequel, but a prequel. It's actually a prequel to this. The events of this film are supposed to take place before Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. So in Raiders, he's supposed to be altruistic. He's collecting artifacts for museums, or he's trying to safeguard them and preserve them for future generations. But in this movie, it's before he develops that persona. So he's more of a grave robber, like a strict grave robber in this movie, because it's before he's learned to be altruistic. So in this sense, he's finding artifacts for the highest bidder. So, somebody asks him to find an ancient artifact, he'll go out and he'll find it and he'll sell it to him. He's all about the money at this point. So this is where he's at in his life right now. In this instance, he's found this artifact for this gangster, Lao Chi. So he's supposed to be trading this artifact for this diamond that Lao Chi has. So this deal goes horribly wrong, and instead of getting the diamond, he's fighting for his life. So he is tricked into drinking this poison, and Lao Chi is going to take the diamonds, the coins, and the artifact, all of this stuff, and in exchange, he'll give Indiana his life back with the antidote, because they just tricked him into drinking the poison. But then all this action ensues. There's guns popping off. There's bottle popping off, and there's people running all over the place because of the gunfire. And Indiana is going to fight to get this antidote. Now he's lost everything. He's lost the statue. He's lost the gold coins that he was offering. He lost the diamond, that what he was really after. And now he has nothing. The only thing he can get now is his life back. And he can get that back by finding the antidote, because now it's all, with all the commotion and whatnot, the antidote is loose. It's loose. It's in the it's in the theater somewhere, because they're at a club or a theater or whatever. Oh, by the way, I keep forgetting this. The name of the club that they're at is quite cute. I keep missing it every time I watch this movie, but the name of the club is Obi-Wan Kenobi. So no, it's called Club Obi-Wan. So that's cute. It's called Club Obi-Wan, and there are a lot of references to Star Wars in this movie, and that's one of the ones. So in Club Obi-Wan, the gangsters are trying to kill Indiana. Indiana's looking for the antidote, and Willie Scott, who he had been introduced to earlier, is looking for the diamond. But she doesn't find the diamond. She gets the antidote, and when Indy notices that, he's able to grab her and essentially rescue her and himself to get them out of the club, get out of the Club Obi-Wan. And then they end up in a car that's driven by Indy's partner, which happens to be I guess a 10-year-old, 12-year-old kid named Short Round. So this is a little Chinese kid named Short Round. So Short Round is using like boxes taped to his feet in order to reach the brake and accelerator and the, what do you call that? The thing that we don't, the clutch, because I was about to say the thing that we don't use anymore. Well, most people don't use clutch anymore. So yeah, he's got boxes taped to his feet so that he can drive the car. And that's how they make their escape, and they make their way to, and I love Short Round. He's one of my favorite characters. So it's like when Indy and Willie Scott end up in the car, he's like Indy tells him to step on it. And Short Round says, "Okie dokie, Dr. Jones, hold on to your potatoes." I was like, oh my God, that's so awesome. It's awesome now, but even when I was younger, it was even more, when I was closer to his age, it was even more awesome. Or when Indy was looking for the antidote, because Willie had picked it up. So Willie had hidden the antidote in her dress. And so Indy is groping around inside of her dress looking for the antidote because he is dying. And Willie's talking about, I'm not that type of girl. I'm like, what is she holding on to it for? It's not like she can bargain with it. But he gets the antidote, and then it's like Short Round turns around and see all this groping going around. He's like, "Dr. Jones, no time for love," right? So anyway, like I said, they make it to the airport. Indiana Jones saves his life by drinking the antidote. Well, he saves his own life. Earl Weber gets him into the airplane, and so Indy thinks he's gotten away. Now the funny thing is that he's being chased by gangsters with guns. The gangsters have been shooting at them the entire time. When he gets to the plane, he acts like he's safe. The problem is that the gangsters could still shoot. It's not a giant plane, it's a small plane. So it's not like the gangsters can't still shoot the plane. But anyway, as far as he's concerned, he's gotten away. He's in the plane, so he feels like he's gotten away. And he says, "Nice try, Lao Chi," and he closes the door, and on the plane it says Lao Chi. So he's on Lao Chi's plane, so he doesn't realize it, but he hasn't gotten away. So the plane is in the air, and they're on their way to somewhere. The pilots have no intention of landing this plane. As soon as Indy and Willie Scott are asleep, or after a while, after everybody falls asleep, they they basically drain the plane of all of its fuel, and then they start to head out to the back to parachute out of the plane. And what I liked about this is that even the extremely minor characters have character, and especially in Steven Spielberg film. So when the pilot and the co-pilot, when they're about to jump out, the pilot is all ready. He's like, it's just part of the job. He's ready to jump out the plane. But the co-pilot is hesitant. Like he's hesitant, even though the plane is at that time dumping its fuel, and that they're supposed to allow this plane to crash, killing its passengers. The co-pilot is still hesitant about jumping out the plane, so the pilot has to push the co-pilot out the plane. I mean, these are two extremely minor characters, but it's so funny how they are, how they're given so much, even though they're not really huge. They don't have that much screen time, but they're given so much to work with. So, anyways, soon after they leave, Willie wakes up and notices nobody's flying the plane, and he goes to the cockpit, and he can't fly a plane, and he thinks maybe he can figure it out, but the plane is out of fuel, so he's like, he has no time to figure it out. And the whole plane escape was insane. It was like both of our favorite parts, mine and Zach's. So they're all looking around. Short Round tells them there's no more parachutes. So Indiana Jones finds a raft inside the plane. Most of the references to Star Wars are audio cues. So one of the references is one of the when the jet engines, or they're not jets, they're props. When the prop engines, when they start to run out of fuel and they stop, they crawl to a stop, and the propellers stop working. It makes a sound that's the same sound as the Millennium Falcon when the Millennium Falcon doesn't want to start. Like when you try to start the Millennium Falcon and it doesn't start, the prop engines make those same sounds. And for the rest of the film, it's really all audio cues, but a lot of them are in this plane escape sequence. So Indy finds a raft. He encourages everybody to jump on the raft with him because that's all they got. They don't have any parachutes. And then Indy inflates the raft and jumps out the plane. So as the raft is falling out the plane, the raft inflates itself. It falls pretty far. And as the raft is falling, you see the plane in the background. It crashes into a mountain, and it uses another sound effect that you can hear in Star Wars. So it falls down to the top of a mountain or hill, and it starts going down really fast, really steep. And then they go off a cliff and they fall some more, and they end up in a river, and the river is rough. And then the river finally calms down and they're relatively safe. So it's crazy that this is even a little bit plausible, but it's so exciting to watch. It's super exciting to see that sequence. It's like, as you're watching it, it's like this, this is impossible, but it's still fun to watch. So Indy realized they're in India because he recognizes an Indian citizen. So the Indian leads them to their village. This Indian happens to be the shaman, and they don't mention his name in the movie, but his name from the wiki is Marhan. So Marhan leads them to his village, and the people are in dire straits. They are starving, and they're in distress. So basically, the last part, this is just before this film becomes incredibly offensive. There's one part where when they get to the village and they're being fed, this is basically some foreign food. It basically looks like I liken it to poi. It kind of looks like poi. It's like a green looking poi and some leafy stuff. It's something that reminds me of poi is something that Hawaiians eat. So it's basically a plant that's been made into a kind of pudding. And so when Willie sees it, she doesn't want to eat it. Obviously, she's not, she's too Western to eat foreign food. So Indy says, like, it's telling her to eat it because it's more food than these people eat in a week. And she says, well, you can eat it. She's trying to give the food back to her server. And she says, you can eat it. And the thing about culture is that in a lot of cultures, one of the ways they welcome people is to give them food. And it's like when you refuse that food, it's kind of off-putting. So when Willie is trying to refuse the food, Indy says, eat it. You're insulting them and you're embarrassing me, which I thought was, even now I thought that was really pointed. He's really sensitive to the culture of the people. Also, he's extremely multilingual. Like, he's in the Japanese portion. In the Chinese portion of the movie, he was speaking Chinese. And in this portion, he knows, I'm not sure what language it is, but he knows the language that the people of that village are speaking. So he's speaking that language. So he's very he's a man of the world. He's worldly. The shaman is asking Indy to bring back a magic stone. The magic stone was removed or stolen from them by this evil cult that worships Kali. The shaman believes that Shiva had struck them down from heaven to bring them to the village in order to go about and bring back this magic stone. Now, Indy is familiar with the stone, so he knows what to look for. And this is kind of where the white savior trope kind of creeps in. It's a couple of ways you can look at it. You can look at it as the white savior trope, which you can kind of negotiate, or you can see it as Indiana Jones being conscripted to do this work, because he's quite unwilling to go and try to bring back the stone, particularly bring back the stone for these people. He doesn't want to do it, but then he hears about the children being stolen, and then he witnesses one of the children that had escaped, and the child escapes with this ancient manuscript that shows that the magic stone may be even more special than the shaman had let on. So he kind of sees fortune and glory. So he's waffling between, at that point, he's kind of waffling between actually returning the stone to this shaman or keeping it for himself. I think he's keeping his options open at this point. But because he's doing it for these people, it could be either that he is the white savior or he is a conscript. But at the end of the movie, they sort of kind of reinforce the white savior trope. So that's one of the problems about this film that I didn't recognize when I saw it as when I was growing up, and that it's they don't really talk about that too much about this film when I hear people talk about this movie. So skipping forward, some of our other favorite parts are when they are on the trail. So they're in the backseat of these elephants, and obviously with Willie's going to have a hard time getting on the elephant's back. So there's a lot of comedic hijinks there. Willie screams a lot in this movie, and there's a lot of complaints about Willie screaming. She's screaming at everything. She's screaming getting on the elephant. She's screaming calling off the elephant. She's screaming when the elephant is bothering her with its trunk and splashing water on her. She's screaming at all the animals and stuff at night in this camping scene. And people complain about that. But I'd say that Willie represents us. You know, we can't all be cool, calm, collected when you're a person who is used to civilization and you get dropped in the middle of a jungle, and for no real reason you're compelled to follow this dude that you don't know into the jungle. I'm not even really sure why Willie follows Indiana Jones into the jungle. She could have just stayed with the villagers and waited for him to come back. But I guess maybe she felt safer with Indiana, or maybe it's because they're going to a palace and there may be a sense of civilization there. There's no real reason for her, or maybe she's enamored with him. Maybe she's attracted to him, and that's why she follows him. Like, cause Short Round is going to go. Short Round, Indiana Jones is a father figure, which is puzzling why Short Round doesn't return in the third movie. But anyways, or any other movie after that, I'm asking where's Short Round, because he's such a great character. But he sees Indiana as a father figure, so of course he's going to go in spite of the danger. So I'm saying that if a lot of us, if I'm in the middle of the woods, I'm screaming too. I'm screaming at the animals. I'm screaming at the swords being charged at me. I'm screaming at being shot at. I'm saying that Willie is most of us. You know, you're in the woods and there's a bat that you've been told is a giant vampire bat, and you're accidentally holding it. You're probably going to scream. There's snakes around, probably going to scream. So yeah, she screams a lot, but I would argue that a lot of us would be screaming. Maybe not as much as Willie, but we're going to be doing some screaming. So in that same scene, you know, there's a card game. It's a funny trivia about the card game that I'll mention later on. But there's a card game while Willie is screaming at everything around her. Short Round and Indy is having this card game, and Short Round is accusing Indy of cheating. It's like, you cheat, you take my money, you cheat. I'm just a little kid. You no good, you no fair, you cheat. And then Indy noticed that there's an ace up Short Round's sleeve, and he's like, oh, so now you accuse me of cheating. And so that's funny. It's a cute little scene. So there's also a snake incident where Willie unwittingly throws a snake at Indiana, and we all know how Indiana is afraid of snakes. But that's kind of the last time in the movie we will see snakes again in the movie, but this is the last time that we will see Indy reacting to a snake. But you got to kind of put it in every Indiana movie, because that's part of the fun, is Indiana reacting or dealing with snakes. So they make it to the palace. There's a point where they're guides, because it's not just them and the elephants. They have guides. And there's a point where the guys go no further and they take the elephants back, but they at least they are in walking distance of the palace. So they go to their palace, and you get a sense of culture there. You have the music and the dancing, which looks really good. And that's really enjoyable. But that's the last time where they seem to pay deference to Indian culture. Now, there is a food scene, the infamous food scene. So there are huge problems, obviously, with the food scene, because it in no way represents Indian culture, and it's played for laughs. But the problem is that, and it is funny. It's very enjoyable for somebody who is totally, it's very enjoyable for somebody who is totally ignorant of culture, or, you know, how other people live or whatever. For instance, most people in India are vegetarians, and in the food scene, it's all meat, and it's all gross meat. Like the first dish is snake surprise. So basically they have what's kind of like a stuffed snake. And this is a snake that Indiana doesn't see. He's fully concentrating on getting information from his host of the palace. So in the palaces, they're met by the prime minister, a British captain, and the little Maharaja. So, you know, they're at this dinner, and Indy is talking. There's a large group of people. Nobody's really paying attention to the food, except, Indy and his host are not really paying attention to the food. Everybody else is eating. So the first dish is snake surprise, which is kind of like a stuffed snake. And then they cut the body of the snake open, and a bunch of these, I don't know, little snakes, slugs, worms, wiggly things come out, snake-like creatures come out. They're still alive, and these people are eating these living, moving creatures. And then after that is, I'm trying to think. There was something else that they had. I think that I can't remember exactly all of the gross stuff they were eating, but at some point, Willie asked for something simple, like a soup, and so the servant obliged. He goes back. He brings back a bowl. She starts digging into the water, and eyeballs start to pop up, and they look like human eyeballs. So she's grossed out by this. And then you have guys. They're eating giant beetles, or they peel off the back of the beetle carapace, and they're slurping up the meat inside the same way that you would eat oyster. Even the British captain is enjoying the beetles. And the last thing they had was chilled monkey brains. Okay, nobody in the world eats chilled monkey brains, but they thought it was fun to put that in the movie. And yes, it was fun. Yes, I laughed at it. And now I recognize that this is extremely offensive. So, and that's where Willie passes out. So that was the dinner scene. So there's a purpose for the dinner scene. It's basically for exposition. And I got some more information about that in the copious trivia. So after that, there's a weird like flirting scene between Indy and Willie. So it's where like Indy offers, like it basically brings her a peace offering. Like, so Willie hasn't eaten, but Indy brings her some fruit, apples and grapes and things of stuff that she can eat, stuff that she recognizes, stuff that she can eat. So she's grateful. She's eating this fruit. There's not even a lot of fruit, but it was going to be enough because they don't eat anything else for the rest of the film. So it has to be enough. So, so they start basically flirting with each other. And then Indy kind of acts like he's like too good for her, or she might not be good enough. So she acts like she's not good enough for him. So now they go to each. So she stays in her room and Indy goes in his room, and they're basically betting each other that the other person would go to the other person's room. So Willie is waiting for Indy in her room because, you know, she feels like she's irresistible and that he's going to come to her, and Indy is doing the same thing on his part. The weird thing is that he's sharing his room with Short Round. So is he expecting Willie to show up? Like if Willie shows up, is he going to have sex with Willie right there in his room with Short Round there? Is that going to happen? I mean, is he going to give this 10-year-old Chinese kid a peep show? I don't know. We don't find out because, as Indy is waiting, he's attacked. And then after he fights off his attacker, he goes to Willie's room to find out if she's got attacked, or if there's any other attackers. There are no more attackers. She's thinking that he's there to, have sex play to make, she thinks that he's there for sexy time, but he's all the way past that. He barely registers her presence. He's looking for the bad guys. He doesn't see any bad guys, but he notices that there's a breeze somewhere, and he finds the breeze is coming from this wall. He starts feeling around for it. The wall has a statue of a woman. And so he's feeling around the statue, and Willie is still trying to get his attention. And then he puts his hand on the statue's breast. Willie is looking in disbelief, and she's like, "I'm right here." So he pushes the statue, and he ends up in a secret room. So he calls Short Round. They go and explore this. There's a room, and then there's a tunnel. They go down the tunnel. And this is another great part where Short Round is not listening. Like Indy tells him not to touch anything, and the step where he stepped, but Short Round is a kid touching everything. So he won't leave stuff alone. But some of it isn't his fault. So he accidentally activates one of the traps in the room. So what this trap does, it starts closing in the room. The ceiling starts to come down, and then spikes come down from the ceiling. And then Indiana's calling Willie for help because they're close enough where he could call for help. Then Willie comes. Now she has to crawl through these bugs. So Wendy is a little bit braver than she has been. So she goes through all of these bugs, because this room is covered in bugs. She goes through there. There's a part where she's supposed to be reaching for a lever. Like Indy believes that there's a lever that will reverse the trap. So she's feeling around, but she's like, she's really slow about it. And Indy's getting super frustrated, and he's getting abusive. He's dying, and yet he's still being abusive. And there's a part where he's looking through this hole, and he says, "Willie, we are going to die." And he has this expression on his face. It's pretty awesome. So she finds the lever. She reverses the trap. The spikes are like right there on Indy's face, but then the ceiling lifts up, and they are basically saved. But then as Willie walks into the room, she reactivates the trap, and they have to run out of the room and through another door. And now they end up in the Temple of Doom. I like the way how it goes from it's basically built like a serial, so it goes from one trap to another. It goes from one place where if this were a serial from the 1930s, this would be a cliffhanger, and you would have to wait till next week find out if Indian Short Round gets crushed by this booby trap or if they were going to be rescued. But given that this is a movie, these aren't cliffhangers. These are basically just small climaxes in the middle of an act. So they're in the temple. They see, I guess it's a huge underground chamber, and they witness this ceremony going on, and they find the head priest is running the ceremony. They're in the middle of sacrificing this man, and the name of the priest is Mola Ram. I didn't register that the name of the priest whenever I watched this movie. I think only when I was doing the trivia that I realized what the name of the priest was. I guess like when I was growing up, the name of the villain didn't matter. The name of the cult that he led is called the Thuggy Cult. The name of the Thuggy Cult didn't matter. It was all being explained, and a lot of it was being explained in the dinner scene, but the gross food and all the comedy elements that they put in that scene was so distracting that I paid no attention to the exposition. It's just, I'm seeing Indiana Jones in danger. I see him getting out of danger. I see him fighting the bad guys. Didn't matter what they were doing. They were bad. Mola Ram, in the middle of the sacrifice, he does this thing where he sticks his hand into the victim's chest while the victim is chained up in this contraption and pulls out the victim's heart. The heart is still beating. The man is still alive, and blood doesn't pour forth. It's like the blood somehow stays in his body, and the wound actually heals up. The skin heals up, but Mola Ram is still holding the heart. And like the whole design of Mola Ram, he's wearing this kind of ram skull, and on top of the ram skull, there's a shrunken head. It's a cacophony of different cultures and religions that are mixed up in Mola Ram. So somehow he has a shrunken head, a tiny shrunken head attached to the top of the skull that he wears as a headdress. Is a fascinating visual. And so he's doing this chant. He's got this man's, the heart that he's holding that he just pulled out of this man is still beating. It's just a fascinating scene. And then the man in the contraption is lowered into this pit. And in this pit is molten rock. I guess they're on top of volcanoes, or they're in a shallow part of the earth where they're close to molten rock. So they lower into this molten rock, and this man is screaming and praying for salvation, praying to be saved. And as he gets real close and into the molten rock, the man's body burns, and as the man's body burned, the heart that Mola Ram that he pulled out of this man, that starts to burn. And you got drums, you got chanting, you got all this stuff, and you got this fantastic chamber that is their ceremonial chamber. So it's all very it's just a fantastic scene, and it's dark, and I guess the set design is fantastic. So it's very dark, so it's one of the dark components of the film, and but it's still fantastic. So at this point, Indy and his crew, they witness the stones. Not only do these people have the stone that was taken from the village, but they have two other identical stones, and when the stones are together, they glow. So Indy explains that the diamonds within the stones glow when the stones are close to each other. It's a fascinating effect. So after the ceremony is over and everybody leaves, Indy goes down to steal the stones, and he could have just left. Somehow, I don't know how he was going to leave, because the way he came in was blocked, so he was going to have to figure out another way out. But doesn't matter. Well, he hears these kids and he kind of hesitates. So his companions get captured while he's going investigating these screams, and then he gets captured, strangely enough, Mola Ram knows who he is, and even though Mola Ram doesn't introduce himself, it seems like Indy knows either he knows who he is or he figures out who he is. So a lot of shenanigans go on. Let's just say that a lot of it. Indy gets brainwashed. He's whipped with his own whip, which is kind of messed up. And at the same time, Short Round, he gets whipped by the little Maharaja. So at this point, it looks like the Maharaja is in league with the cult. So they're both being whipped, and Indy is, well, they're whipped first, and then Indy is brainwashed. For some reason, they only brainwash Indy, and then they decide to sacrifice Willie. So for whatever reason, and then it was going to help because Indy is brainwashed. It was going to be he who helps to sacrifice Willie. So there's blood drinking. There's all of that. So Shorty is taken into the mines with the other kids to mine for the kids are digging for precious stones, and they're looking for the other magic stones. And what's perfect is that there's a point where you know how you're a little kid and people see that you're not working as hard as you should be working, and that's what Short Round is doing. And then an adult comes along and threatens them, or in this case, slaps him or beats him. And then it's just that Short Round has this look on his face, like he's angry and sad. And then he makes like he's hitting the stone with his hammer, but he's really not, like putting his back into it. He's just so angry, giving a stink eye to the guy that just hit him, trying to get him to work harder. It's like the expression on his face is just, I felt that expression. So, but then he gets an idea where, he can just hit the chain, like he's chained on his leg. So he starts to hit his leg irons, the chain between his two legs. And instead of hitting the rocks, like since he's sitting down and he's hitting it looks like he's hitting the rock, but he's hitting the chain. And nobody really notices it because there's a bunch of kids there, and there's not enough adults to look after all of these kids that they've kidnapped to mine for this stuff. So he frees himself, which is awesome about him. He has a wherewithal to free himself. They try to free Indy, but Indy is brainwashed. So Indy slaps the kid, and that's another dark part that we had talked about earlier, or that I had talked about earlier. And but then Shorty finds a torch. There are torches all over the place because they're on the ground. So he grabs a torch and he jams the torch into Indy's torso. He says, "I love you, Indy," and then he rams the torch into Indy's torso, and Indy wakes up. Now the fire has broken the spell. So then Indy and Short Round, they proceed to fight their way out of their situation. So there's a huge action sequence, a whole bunch of fighting and stuff is going on. We love this part. Both me and Zach love this part. It's like it's very well choreographed action. There's just people fighting all over the place. There's this giant man. There's this giant. He's not actually Indian. He's actually, I believe he's in brownface. It was a gag that Spielberg and Lucas was trying to do with this guy, where he appears in every film, but he's a different person. So like in Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, he played the giant German man that was giving Indy a hard time in one of the scenes. And so now he's playing a giant Indian man who's giving Indy a hard time in his fight scene. And for some reason, he doesn't show up in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, because that would have completed the gag. But so it's a guy in brown face, but he's there as part of a gag, and I think he's the only white man in brown face in the movie. But anyways, so Andy is supposed to be fighting this gigantic man, and so all of that is great. So there is a point where while Andy is fighting this man, the little Maharaja gets a hold of effigy it's a small effigy of Indiana Jones. And it's like, the only reason you know that it's an effigy of Indiana Jones is because the effigy has a fedora on it. So it's basically what appears to be a voodoo doll. I can't say. I know that these types of dolls are in different cultures, but I can't say for certain if it's in the Indian culture as well. But that's what the little Maharaja is using, and so he's stabbing the voodoo doll, and Indiana Jones feels the pain immediately. So he's trying to fight this dude, but he's being stabbed at the same time. So this is when Short Round, he goes to where the little Maharaja is, and they get into a fight, and he basically rescues Indy that way. He finally gets the voodoo doll away from the other kid, and he burns the other kid, which frees the other kid from the brainwashing. And so there's this funny part where the kid is going through, Short Round is going through some stuff. Shorty is he's doing a lot of work, but as he's doing his work, Indy is like, Short Round, stop fooling around with that kid and get down here. So they go down, all the heroes, they all make their way to this mine cart. And so I guess they're going to try to get away. I don't know how they know where the mine cart goes. It might go to nowhere, but they get on the mine cart to try to get away from the bad guys. The bad guys are doing the shooting and the chasing, and they never hit Indy. They're very poor shots. Throughout this entire movie, they're very poor shots. They are stormtroopers, and you don't have to worry about them. That might be another Star Wars reference. Anyway, they're in this cart, and they get away from their pursuers. So Indy has to stop the cart, but they're going really fast. Their brakes fail, so he gets out the cart to try to stop the cart with his feet, the soles of his shoes, that is, before they hit and crash. And so he's successful, but now the soles are extremely hot, right? Because he used the soles of his shoes to stop the cart. And now he's looking for water. He's like, water, water, water. And next thing you know, there's this huge wave of water because the Mullah Ram had released this huge thing of water. And so now the water comes rushing down through this cave. And now he's like, water, water. So now they have to get away from this rushing water. They make it to the outside. I don't know how they know where they're going, but they make it to this outside. And it's like, there's like a hole or like a cave exit. But the cave exit is like, it basically needs to nowhere. It's basically a cliff face, sort of. So they go out into this cliff face, and there's just barely enough of a cliff for them to step on. So the water's rushing down. So they I forgot how they got off the cliff face. I don't think they go into the water. I guess they make it around to the top, to the land. But when they get to the top, it's Mullah Ram standing standing there. I guess I can't remember how that happened. I know first they end up on a bridge somewhere. So the bridge scene is a great scene. It's even before they get to the bridge scene, it's one last Star Wars reference where Indiana is like fighting these two guys. He's fighting off these guys with these swords, and he fights them off, and he starts to chase them away, and then he runs back the other way because there's a whole huge group of people chasing him now. And so this is in reference to a similar scene that happened in Star Wars with Harrison Ford. So they make their way to the bridge, and this is a fantastic, iconic bridge scene. So he goes into the middle of the bridge. They try to make their way across, but Mullah Ram is on one end of the bridge and with some troops, and a bunch of other troops on the other. And it's just Indiana Jones with a sword, and that's where Indiana Jones and his companions in the middle of the bridge with a sword. And so he comes up with this plan. He tells Short Round in Chinese that he's going to cut the bridge in half with the sword. And that's when Short Round tells Willie, hang on, lady, we're going for a ride. So so he does it. He cuts the bridge, and then a bunch of people fall off. There are alligators. The bridge is going across this gorge. It's a very flimsy, wooden bridge, and the bridge is over this huge gorge, and in the water are a whole bunch of alligators. So, are there alligators in India? I don't think so. I think they're mostly crocodiles. But for the sake of our argument, we're going with alligators. So, the alligators get real excited because a bunch of men just fell into the water, and they get to attacking. So now, Indiana Jones and his companions are on one end of the bridge, on the cliff face, and they have this whole scene where, where he's trying to basically still escape the bad guys. The Mullah Ram is also on the bridge, and during all this commotion, they end up together, and Indiana still has the stones. So they're both fighting over the bag with the stones inside. So basically, Indiana goes into a kind of prayer, and he says that Mullah Ram has betrayed Sheba, and he chants this over and over again. He chants it in a different language, and then he says, "You betrayed Sheba," and so suddenly the stones start to burn, and they burn themselves away from, like they're on fire. They burn away from the bag. Two of the stones fall directly into the river, and then one of them, the Mullah Ram tries to grab as it's in the air. He grabs it, but the stone is on fire and it burns his hand, so he lets go. It's a hot potato, and Indiana Jones grabs the stone. The stone immediately cools off before Indiana Jones catches it. So because Mullah Ram, he burns his hand, is distracted. Jones hits him. Mullah Ram's fall, and as he's falling, his bald head hits the cliff face, and he bounces again off the cliff face and ends up in the water. And then all you see are the black and red robes that he was wearing. The alligators doing their death roll over whatever is in the water, wearing red and black. So Indiana Jones. Oh, also, he's not out of danger yet, because still the cult is still trying to hit him with arrows, right? So the people are trying to shoot arrows at him on the other side of the gorge, where the other half of the bridge is, and they're missing. None of these people can shoot. I mean, there's a bunch of guys shooting arrows at him, and none of them hit. It's like, if you have a bunch of guys, the odds suggest that if you have a whole bunch of guys shooting arrows at you, one of them should hit you by accident, but none of them hit. So when Indy climbs the ladder to the top, Willie and Short Round are already safe. Then the British Army shows up. Why does the British Army show up? It doesn't matter, because it's the end of the movie. It looks good. It looks heroic. We don't know, and we don't care. But they do show up. It's really not the British Army. It's really the British captain that shows up with this with an Indian brigade, and they got rifles, and so they start shooting at the cult members with the arrows that are on the other side of the bridge, so that Indiana can make a more safe escape. And the reason I ask why the British captain showed up with this army troop is because they don't know where Indiana is, and they have no reason to know. From his perspective, Indiana Jones, Willie Scott, and Short Round retires to their room, and they never come out again from his perspective. So there's no reason for him to show up where he did, when he did. It doesn't make a lick of sense, because everybody that he was dealing with in the palace was with the cult. The little Maharaja was with the cult. The prime minister was with the cult. All of their servants were with the cult, or they didn't know. I don't think any of the dancing ladies were with the cult, but they definitely didn't know. So there's no reason that and if they don't know, so they don't know the layout. They don't know the secret passages. They don't know the other ways out. But the British guy shows up and saves Indiana Jones and his friends. So it looks good. So we don't care. We don't ask questions, especially when we first saw the movie. And then, at the end, they return. Indiana chooses to return the stone. I think Willie was suggested that he could have kept it for the fortune and glory that he had wanted. But I think this is where he learns, when he sees the positive effect that returning the stone brings to these people, he realizes that he shouldn't be tomb robbing for himself. He should be tomb robbing to get these artifacts into museums, because in later films, he's always, this thing belongs in a museum. And so, or to keep sacred artifacts out of the hands of the Nazis. So that's basically been his thing, is keeping it out of, you don't want to give powerful ancient objects to people who want to white supremacists. You don't want to do that. So and so at the end of the movie, all the kids are returning home, like, because during all the commotion they rescued the kids. The kids took part in rescuing themselves, and as Indiana Jones returns to the village, all the kids return to the village. This is all happiness and everything. And the shaman comes and he says that they knew that Indiana had succeeded, because then the water and the life started to return to his village. So he knew that Indy was coming back. And, you know, everybody's happy and everything. And Willie and Indiana, they play the little weird flirting game, but then they do end up kissing at the end. And then all of the little brown kids, they come and they surround their white savior, reinforcing their white savior narratives. There are some issues with this film that I had not seen before, but I can see them now. It's still, it doesn't too much. I'm aware of it, but I still like this movie. I know it's kind of messed up, and apologies. And had I known then what I know now, that I guess I would see it in a different light, but it's still lots of fun and adventure, even though it's got some issues and complications. So I'm going to talk more about it. Don't mean to hammer it home, but I am going to talk more about it. So this episode is going to run a little bit long. It's already about an hour, so I'm just going to go a little bit longer, and then I'll let you go. Or you can pause it right here and then come back and continue. But we're going to take a short break, and after that little short audio cue, we will continue with the trivia. All right, now we're back with the trivia, and we are going to talk about the trivia that we got from IMDb. So, for the bug chamber sequence, Kate Capshaw was really covered with over 2,000 insects. She took sedatives prior to the scene to get over her initial fear and claimed they definitely worked. You know, I believe her. Dr. Nanayakara, he played the Indian village shaman. He did not speak a word of English. He delivered his lines phonetically by mimicking Steven Spielberg, who was prompting him off camera. The pauses in his dialogue were therefore not for dramatic effect, but rather waiting for his next line. And that's fascinating. Kate Capshaw was very critical of her own character, saying that Willie was not much more than a dumb, screaming blonde. I would have to say that is true, but as I said earlier, any regular person that's used to civilization and is not used to being in the woods with insects or used to being surrounded by knives and guns, I think you'd be screaming too. You'd be a dumb, screaming blonde too. Amrish Puri shaved his head for the role of Mola Ram. This created such an impression that he kept this look and became one of India's most popular film villains. So, something positive came out of this horribly offensive film. An unproduced script that became Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull from 2008 had Indiana reveal what happened to Willie, saying, "Last I heard, she married a big shot director." This was an in-joke, as Kate Capshaw married Steven Spielberg, though the joke did not make it to the final draft. And it should have. I would have appreciated some, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? I would have appreciated some kind of a, what's the word I'm looking for? Closure to that relationship. It would have been cool if they put it in there. While filming the whipping scene, the crew played a practical joke on Harrison Ford. While he was chained to a large stone, Barbara Streisand appeared dressed in a leather dominatrix outfit. She proceeded to whip him, saying, "That's for Hannibal Street, the worst movie I ever saw." She continued whipping him for Star Wars and making all of that money. Carrie Fisher then threw herself in front of Ford to protect him, and Irving Kershner chided director Steven Spielberg. "This is how you run your movies?" This entire sequence was filmed. Oh, how I would love to see this sequence. I would love to see this somewhere. Is this in a extras? Is this in an extras DVD? I would really love. You know what? I have the DVD. That's how I watched this movie. Maybe I should go check it out. And if you don't know, Irving Kershner, he was the director of The Empire Strikes Back. Ke Huy Quan film debut. This is his first movie. The guy who played Short Round. An open casting call was put out to all elementary schools to find a young Asian actor to play Short Round. Quan had arrived with his brother, not to audition, but to merely provide moral support. He caught the casting director's attention because he spent the entire time of his brother's audition telling him what to do and what not to do. Steven Spielberg liked his personality, so he and Harrison Ford improvised a scene where Short Round accuses Indy of cheating during a card game. Quan won the role over about 6,000 other auditions. And this is the scene that we see in the film. So I thought that was really cool. That's cool. That's a heartwarming story out of this. There was a scene involving Kate Capshaw and a rather large snake, which had to be cut as Capshaw was having panic attacks at the very prospect of it. Steven Spielberg jokingly says that the only reason Kate married him later was because he allowed the scene to be cut. The nightclub in the opening scene is called Club Obi-Wan. I had mentioned that earlier. Harrison Ford suffered a herniated disc in his back in a scene where he was attacked in his bedroom by a thuggy assassin, causing production to shut down while Ford was flown to Los Angeles for spinal surgery. A large portion of Ford's work in the fights and chases in the Temple of Doom is actually performed by stuntman Vic Armstrong. Normally, special care needs to be taken to hide a stuntman's face from the camera, but this proved to be largely unnecessary since Armstrong bore an uncanny resemblance to Ford at the time, both in the face and body dimensions. I never noticed the stuntman. Knowing this, I was looking for him, and I just never noticed the stuntman. All I saw was Harrison Ford. So and I looked at the pictures of Vic Armstrong and Harrison Ford together, and when they were both younger, they did look kind of alike, but they didn't exactly look like twins. So I felt like I would have known, especially with Blu-ray and DVD. Well, I guess because I watched this on DVD, I probably didn't see it that way. But I guess if I watched it on Blu-ray, I would probably see it. But I'm thinking about this, and I'm also thinking about a Star Trek episode that I saw where Captain Kirk was in one of his fights. And because this was like the remastered version of the Star Trek TV show, I could clearly see that it was a stuntman doing all the fighting. Both characters, it was William Shatner and Ricardo Montalban, and neither of them were in this fight. It was two stuntmen, and you can clearly see the face of the stuntman that was playing Captain Kirk, that it wasn't him. So I felt like I should have seen Vic Armstrong, but I never did. So it's master movie making, or it was because I was looking at a DVD and it didn't have that high enough definition for me to tell. Moving along. George Lucas made the film a prequel as he did not want the Nazis to be the villains once more. So this was a bad choice. There are other villains he could have used, or he didn't have to be, or Steven Spielberg didn't have to be as offensive to the villains with the villains that they chose, or with the people that they chose to use. and it kind of proved fruitless because it seems like in every other movie it's been the Nazis. I don't know, was it the Nazis in the Indiana Jones 3? I don't remember. The python that Willie Scott mistakes for an elephant's trunk was brought to Sri Lanka. Sorry. It was brought to Sri Lanka for shooting by animal handler Michael Culling. But since the snake and its companion weren't very welcome in the country, he had to book them their hotel rooms under fake names, Mr. and Mrs. Longfellow. Ha ha ha, how clever. Mularam's chanting of Maro, Maro, Sorrow Ko, Kamdi, Nocho, Pido Kun, literally translated from Hindi is kill the pig, flay his skin, drink his blood. This is similar to the chant from William Golding's The Lord of the Flies. Kate Capshaw's dress in the Shanghai Club was completely made of 1920s and 1930s original beads. This meant that there was only enough to make one dress. The opening dance number was actually the last scene to be shot, but the dress did feature in some earlier location shoots in Sri Lanka, in particular a nighttime one with Harrison Ford and Kate Capshaw sitting by a fire with the dress drying on a nearby tree. Unfortunately, an elephant had started to eat the entire back of the dress, which was saved just in time. Consequently, some emergency repair work had to be done on what remained of the original beads, and it was costume designer Anthony Powell who had to fill out the insurance forms. As to the reason for the damage, he had no option but to put dress eaten by elephant. That's fun. In 1984, Capshaw appeared on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson to promote Temple of Doom. Right after she promoted the film and did her interview with Johnny, Siskel and Ebert came on and did their roundup of the recent films playing. They both slammed Kate Capshaw's performance in the Temple of Doom, calling it wimpy and whiny. Capshaw replied, "Please don't talk about me like I'm not here. I am here." If you remember how The Tonight Show was, I don't know if they still do it. I haven't been watching it. But like when you have them one guest, and then after that guest talks, they slide over to the couch and you welcome your next guest. And so these guests happen to be Siskel and Ebert, and they're just trashing Kate Capshaw, and she's sitting right there. So that's kind of messed up. Also, I bet these guys would be wimpy and whiny too. Siskel and Ebert, can you imagine Siskel and Ebert in the woods, right, with snakes and beetles and elephants? I bet they'd be screaming too. Kate Capshaw had to be taught how to scream. Willie Scott screams a grand total of 71 times throughout the movie. During production, the film was starting to go over budget, and Spielberg went to the writers Willard Hawk and Gloria Katz and asked them to make changes to the script in order to save money. They removed one page from the script and saved $1 million. It was a planned air chase scene using vintage biplanes. The scene was removed from the film and was later incorporated into Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade from 1989. Kate Capshaw received a black eye on a runway mine cart sequence. The next day, when she reported to work, everybody else in the set was wearing a black smudge under their eye. That's pretty cool. It's nice to have a cast and crew like that. The three main characters are named after dogs. Short Round was named after screenwriter Willard Huck's dog, which was named after the orphan in The Steel Helmet, a movie from 1951. Willie was named after Steven Spielberg's dog, and Indiana was named after George Lucas's dog. Steven Spielberg's first sequel, though technically a prequel, as this film takes place in 1935, before Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, which took place in 1936, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade in 1938, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull in 1957. George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, Gloria Katz, and Willem Hawk were concerned how to keep the audience interested during the exposition on the Thuggee cult. Hawk and Katz proposed a tiger hunt, but Spielberg said, "There's no way I'm going to stay in India long enough to shoot a tiger hunt." They eventually decided on a dinner scene involving eating bugs, monkey brains, and the like. Steve and George both still react like children, so their ideas was to make it as gross as possible, says Katz. Ironic, ha ha ha, that it was because of this scene that they weren't allowed to even shoot in India, so they ended up in Sri Lanka. So that's kind of, he didn't want to do a tiger hunt because he didn't want to stay in India that long. And had he decided to shoot a tiger hunt, then he would have probably been allowed to film in India instead of Sri Lanka, and maybe it would not have been banned in India. So I don't know, lesson for you? Maybe. Scenes involving the Long Rope Bridge were filmed on 3 different continents. The entire bridge itself was built on location in Sri Lanka, and the scenes where Indy cuts the bridge were filmed there also. The scene where the bridge was hanging along the cliff, or the side of the cliff, with everyone hanging on, were filmed at Elstree Studios in London. Finally, the alligators at the end were shot by producer Frank Marshall in Florida, which is why we see alligators in India instead of crocodiles. Filmmakers were unable to get permission to shoot scenes in India. The Indian government requested a copy of the script and demanded that the word Maharaja be removed, fearing that the content did not reflect their culture. As a result, production was moved to Sri Lanka, where some locations were also used for the bridge or the bridge on the River Kwai from 1957. And I'm pretty sure that the dinner scene had something to do with that too. The film's original title was Indiana Jones and the Temple of Death, which was changed because it sounded too foreboding. It was retained in the film's German title, Indiana Jones under Tempel des Todes. I don't know if I pronounced that right. I apologize to the people of Germany. The production was fortunate in their main location in I'm sorry, what am I saying? The production was fortunate in their main location in the town of Kandy, Sri Lanka, as nearby a British engineering company was building a dam. When it came time for the crew to shoot on a suspension bridge over the gorge, the British engineers were able to design and build one for them very quickly. Steven Spielberg said in 1989, "I wasn't happy with Temple of Doom at all. It was too dark, too subterranean, and too horrific. I thought it out-poltered Poltergeist from 1982. There was not an ounce of my own personal feeling in Temple of Doom." He later added during the making of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom documentary, "Temple of Doom is my least favorite of the trilogy. I look back and I say, well, the greatest thing I got out of it was I met Kate Capshaw. We married years later, and that to me was the reason that I was fated to make Temple of Doom." In the US, this film and Gremlins from 1984 led to the creation of the PG-13 rating. Many people felt both movies were too violent for a PG rating, but not violent enough for an R rating. Some believe that both films would have been rated R if Steven Spielberg's name hadn't been attached. The Flamingo Kid from 1984 was the first film to receive a PG-13 rating, but it sat on the shelves for 5 months before being released. Red Dawn from 1984 was the first film released with a PG-13 rating. The huge mine shaft was a circular construction around the largest soundstage, making it look different, just the way they altered the lighting every time the carts completed a loop. So that was clever. So that's it for the trivia, and now let's find out what the critics thought. And now we're going to find out what the critics thought about this spectacular movie. The critics gave it an 83%. The audience score is 81% on Rotten Tomatoes, and the IMDb score is 7.5 out of 10. Now I'm going to do something a little bit different for Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. I'm going to give you a couple of what the critics thought, and then I'm going to delve. Let me get that word out. I'm going to delve into some of the criticisms as far as why some people felt that it was highly, highly inappropriate or insulting. So, there's a site that I went to. I was looking for something else, and I found something that I felt like I could give those voices space to talk about why this film was so offensive. So as far as what the critics thought of this movie, Roger Ebert from the Chicago Sun-Times wrote, "The kind of movie where your date is always grabbing your forearm in a vice-like grip as unbearable excitement unfolds on the screen. After the movie is over, you've had a great time, but your arm is black and blue for a week." Vincent Canby from the New York Times wrote, "Too shapeless to be the fun that Raiders is, but shape may be besides the point. Old-time 15-part movie serials didn't have shape. They just went on and on and on, which is what Indiana Jones does with humor and technical invention." Now, from here, we're going to look at what I found on a Quora page. See, I typed in, or what I was looking for in Google search, was the food in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom real? And it led me to a page which answers the question, why did Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom show Indians as barbarians? Which is an interesting question. So this is from a Quora page, and I left that page in the show notes in case anybody was curious. So Mahesh Kunar from Hyderabad, Telangana, India wrote, "British ruled India for centuries. They plundered our wealth. They killed the people who retaliated. They attacked our culture. Even after leaving our country, the Westerners continued their attack on our culture. In this particular movie, it is shown that snakes, bugs, and monkey skull are served on a dining table. Even the villain is priest who is a Kali worshiper, but have shown her as an evil god and her followers drinking blood. Not just that, the words told by the villain in the movie are, 'We will throw the British out of India. We will overrun the Muslims, and we will bring down your Hebrew God, and Kali will rule the world.' How weird are those words? It's them who invaded half the world and did crusades in the name of religion, now portraying Hinduism as barbarians. Who wants to rule the world? So pity for their malign hearts. The movie might be released in 1984, but even today, what the West shows about India is slums. I don't know where they search to find these slums. All they talk about is unhygienic uncleanliness of India. Not just that, they are sponsoring people like Elijah, a self-proclaimed intellectual who targets Hinduism in the name of freedom of expression. Up next is Joseph Agarwala. He wrote, "I think they saw no problem in sacrificing fact for entertainment, which, in my opinion, isn't justified. Unlike most of the people who commented, they have portrayed Kali Mata as an evil god, quote unquote, and her worshippers as thuggies, which is absurd. I think the reason people here are suggesting that it's acceptable in the name of entertainment, or it's not Indians, it's the Kali cult, is because it's not their culture and religion being perverted for entertainment. In India, Kali Mata is worshipped alongside the other gods and is not evil. Yes, films need villains, but the Nazis in the other films were evil in reality, so you cannot liken this as being the same thing. This sort of film wouldn't be made today because most people recognize it as culturally insensitive and racist." And finally, we have Chandra Venu, a self-described Dravidian thinker, follower of Anna Duraj from Chennai, Tamil Nadu, India, and Madras in parentheses. They wrote, I'm an Indian, pure 100% native Tamilian. I am 200% vegetarian, whereas all in my family are 200% non-vegetarian. When we saw the movie in TV with family, we were all rolling with laughter. I suppose that is for a joke. To take it seriously is sheer stupidity on part of some North Indians who just got to learn English and watch English movies. And if you ask me, which you're not, this is me speaking, this is not the quote. So if you're asking me, and you're not asking, but if you were to ask me, because I grew up with this movie, I can't help but enjoy it. And with the same, but now as I watch it, I'm watching it with the understanding that there are a lot of people that find this offensive. But at the same time, I don't take it seriously. Now that I understand more about the culture that this movie is basically poking fun of, I can understand that the exaggeration that they portray on the movie is not to be taken seriously. It's a poor joke. It's done in poor taste. I can understand that, but it's at the end of the day, it's still just a joke, and I can enjoy it with that in mind. And so that's it. So finally, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom is, as of this recording, available for purchase at your favorite streaming service. That's it for today. Please join us next week as we look into a classic alien refugee film, Alien Nation. Follow us on Twitter or TikTok at Backlook Cinema, or on Facebook or Instagram at Backlook Cinema Podcast for updates. Don't forget that you can contact us with any questions or comments or suggestions at fanmail@backlookcinema.com. One last time, if you like this show, then please help us grow. To do this, you can subscribe to the show, rate us, or write a review on Spotify, Podchaser.com, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast app. Believe me, it matters. Be safe. Share a movie from yesteryear with your family. Hug your loved ones. And if you're going to be anything, be outstanding.